fun. I guess you can get like flipped up for $10.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to buy the little.
They had one for Ohio State, and I haven't heard any feedback on that yet. I was not going to go down there.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, I saw like the journal start, but it wasn't until Tammy's like, oh yeah, you're
Top of the fold.
Go ahead and get this pre-council meeting. So sorry, I am late. Welcome, welcome, Jennifer. Welcome, Dan.
Hello, members of the City Council, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Dan Marvin, I thought we would join you as the introduction to Brandon's presentation on the West Haymarket JPA item on your agenda today, because both of us had different roles 10 years ago related to the West Haymarket, and we thought it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about what's happened in the last decade and what great success this project has really been for the community. So then, in 2008, 2009, I was a consultant. I worked for the West Haymarket Action Team, which was a public-private partnership group between the city and the business community that helped strategize and work through how to put together the project that was going to put before the voters. And worked on that in 2008, 2009, and then helped manage the campaign that took place in May of 2010. Dan?
And I was on the city council from 2005 to 2009, and then after I left council, Mayor asked me if I would shepherd this project through, and I helped craft the joint public agency that is part of this project, and worked with the implementation of the entire plan over the next 4 years. From 2009 to 2013, I left in the fall of 2013 after we opened the doors at the arena, which was a little ahead of time and on budget too.
So we thought it would be helpful to you and maybe some of the viewers as you think about the information that Brandon's going to present about the potential refinancing of the bonds that have paid for the construction that's happened to date, to talk a little bit about what we promised when we took this project to the voters in 2010 and what we've done. So as Dan mentioned.
So up on the screen here, this is before we did anything. Mm-hmm. This is the rail yard, and you can see the Lincoln Station there, post office, those are the key. But there was a huge void out there that had some dirty dirt in it. And we had tested all of that and tried to identify what we could do. We had a couple of property owners down south. We had Ultra Scrap and we had the Watson Bricks and Lumber Yard. We had to do some relocation of those. And then if we turn to the next one, here it is kind of as an active construction site. Since in that picture, we'd purchased the land, we'd moved the Burlington Northern. You can see the white areas, the tracks being moved, which creates this large opening where we put all of our different buildings and created the whole West Haymarket area. And then the last one, which I think we want to spend a little time talking about this was when I would go out and tell people, what are we going to build? We told them we were going to build an arena at the top. We told them we were going to build a parking facility on the north of the arena as a surface lot. And then we designed in a parking garage across in the arena, and we built in areas for buildings to happen, an ice center here, and a fabulous district energy plant that was supposed to go in down here. And we made some changes to that plan, and the plan that we did not put district energy here, and it put the ice center up here. What that did was it opened the area up, and we hid our district energy plant right in here on the backside of a garage, and we used the alleyway as a way to deliver the hot and cold water through the area, which what you'll see probably in another 3 to 4 weeks is some updated plans on what will be a new downtown park down in here. So we opened this up. Instead of having a rather industrial looking plant, we'll have a green space down here for a park. And we've had some buildings go in. And this actually shows an empty block, but actually the Huddle building is in here.
Sorry, Google Earth was not up to date this morning.
Google, it's changing so fast, Google Earth can't even keep up with it. So that's kind of the project that we built. We made some changes along the way. I would argue all the changes were all for the better. It allowed for more development to go in the area and obviously some green space. And the other change that we did was the original concept only had this parking garage in the financials. With the proposal for another garage here, we went and created a parking garage here and here, which I think was opportune to do that. And Wayne has told me that we're getting close to capacity on all 3 of those garages too. So I think it was opportune to be able to do it both from a financing perspective, to do it all together. It kept us out of the way of private developers when they go in and build a building, but it also gave us opportunities to provide parking for buildings as they've come online.
So in addition to the small changes, but good changes that happened as we finished construction of the West Haymarket over the last 10 years, the things we talked about during the campaign that were important, I think it's important to remember that we came through and delivered on our promises, which is that we had a lot of local employment. 70 to 80% of all the construction jobs were filled by locals. The full-time jobs we projected that would occur at the arena have occurred. We said it would be over 40, and there are 41 at this point. There have been hundreds of part-time jobs filled at the arena and volunteer opportunities to raise money for nonprofits as part of their work. We retained and actually recaptured state tournaments. So now we have both boys, girls basketball and girls volleyball at the PBA. We've seen 1.3 million people come through the arena to see major concerts, and over 81 million in ticket sales alone for those concerts. And the cleanup of the rail yards, which we estimated would take only $6 to $7 million, was met. And so we feel like the community came together and we all made this project happen, and we're really excited about where we are today. And now we have an opportunity to improve our financial standing with the refinancing of the bonds you're going to see on the agenda today. We'd be happy to answer any questions, but we leave it to Brandon.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, right, please.
Say those numbers again. 1.3 million visitors?
No,
fans have come to
Fans.
concerts. That's just concerts, not basketball.
Not basketball. 1.3 million fans.
$81 million in ticket sales, generating for the city $1.2 million in additional sales tax dollars. Not only that, the arena itself generates about $5 million a year in concession sales, of which it pays sales tax to the city and pays the food and beverage tax. So an additional $100,000 in the occupation tax and probably around $70,000 in additional sales tax just from concession sales too.
And I would note, we can get you a lot more information. We were trying to condense this for time restraint purposes, and since it was just an
Right.
introduction. But Tom Lorenz has a vast number of
Oh, yeah.
other facts and information we'd be happy to forward to you.
But you're going to share some of those at the public hearing, because those are really impressive numbers. When?
Can, or?
Oh, okay.
Sure. But are you ready for Brandon?
That's great.
We'll have him talk about this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet. Well, I just have one comment. I know that I got elected to the city council in 2015, and one of my first tasks was greeting all the travel writers that the different chambers of commerce, like the Lincoln Chamber, Omaha, and the Nebraska Chamber, and then they have all these writers of travel from like the LA Times to the New York Times, and we came and we met in the rail yard, and then I said, you know, this wasn't here 5 years ago. And they were like, what? What? I said, no, this wasn't here 5 years ago. And then I pull out all my laminated cards about, you know, Lincoln is recognized as the top city to raise a family and all this. And then they took pictures of those. But they were blown away by how rapidly this whole area got built out and how vibrant it seemed to them. So, good job. Good job.
All right, well,
Okay.
they showed you all the pretty pictures.
Okay, what do you got? Just
I have graphs and charts.
graphs and
Sorry.
charts. Okay.
You said it like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
We like graphs.
So the proposal on the agenda today, we're talking about bond refinancing for two series of 2011 and the 2013 series for the JPA. Scott Keene is acting as our municipal advisor on the issue with Piper Jaffrey. And then we got Mike Rogers with Gilmore Bell, who's acting as bond counsel. They're both here today, and they'll be at council too if you have any questions. So I just want to give you a kind of overall picture of the finances of the JPA. So this is our revenue budget for 1920. This is the adopted budget of $34.8 million. You can see the majority of all that comes through occupation taxes, the $17.9 million. Intergovernmental revenues are basically subsidies that we get from the Build America bonds that were issued for two of the series out of the for like $200 million. Charges for services, that's basically premium seat sales for loge boxes, suites, and then we also charge for DEC payments. So we pay the full DEC bill, and then we bill that back to the private customers within the JPA footprint. And then there's some sell land, this based on Block 4, Block 5 items that have been approved. And then others, just some cash transfers in, fees, interest income, and then the majority of that is the sponsorship money that we get from ING for all the advertisement that's put into the arena. Here's the adopted expenditure budget, $29.6 million. You can see debt is the largest at 16.8, 57%. Contractual services, that goes to pay for parking management, DEC costs that I just talked about. We've got the operating increment in there of $600,000, and then that IMG money as well. We receive that, and then we pay that back out to the Pinnacle Bank Arena. And I'm going to talk about how those finances flow here in the next chart. Capital outlay is just the ongoing capital expenses that occur within the arena, and a lot of those are also based on development agreements that we have currently, so the various streetscapes throughout the district. And then I believe the JPA also approved $500,000 toward the development of the parkland on Block 5. So total, we got about a surplus projecting of $5 million for the current year. So the way this was set up is that the majority of all of the funds would come over to the West Haymarket JPA. And the reason that was essentially done, I think, was to ensure that we had adequate coverage for the bond payments that were going to be coming in. So you see, the arena generates about $9 million, of which about $3.5 million stays with the arena. The other $5.5 million goes over to the West Haymarket JPA. So that's, we've attributed like arena seat revenues, so all the suite sales, loge box, any of the arena sponsorships, so IMG money, rent from UNL, and then we also attribute some parking for event revenue is generated by the arena. So the total bucket for the JPA in total is $34.8 million. 5.5 is generated by the arena that comes to the JPA. Then non-arena revenue, so that's the occupation taxes, the federal debt subsidy for the Build America bonds, DEC customers, and then some other revenue within there. So operating expenditures about 29.6, of which we then transfer back 1.8 million to the PBA as a operating increment, and also to pay for the sponsorship money that's received. So under on the arena, you see about 9 million in revenues, 5.6 in operating expenditures. But a lot of those funds go over to the JPA just on how it was originally set up. Okay, so this is the total outstanding bonds that we have for the JPA. And this does, in effect, impact the city's finances within the audited financials, because we have to physically incorporate the JPA financials onto the city's financials. So that's something that we have to do for the audit. But you can see the outstanding debt somewhere about $325 million. We're getting to the point where principal payments were going to start being made. So as part of the structure of how the bonds for the JPA was originally set up, was that the principal payments were kind of backloaded a little to allow for growth of the occupation taxes over time, so that we could get to a certain point and then we'd start making principal payments. So next year is that time. From what was originally projected from the occupation taxes compared to now, we're pretty far ahead. We're about 25% over what we thought we would get right now. So all the projections for the JPA have been fairly conservative and continue to be as we move forward. We always budget a 2% increase in occupation taxes. This is just a look at the principal and interest. You can see the interest in the dark pink, and then the principal in the light pink. You can see the step up in 2021 when first principal payment, or the large one, comes on, and then there's another step up in 21-22. So on an annual basis, we're generally going through and looking, what type of yields are out there, and the best way to do that for a 30-year Treasury yield, it's a comparable range into what we could potentially refinance when we're looking at JPA bonds. So you can look at that over time. Right now we're sitting at historical lows, which really gives us an opportunity to look at refinancing the bonds. And like I said, we work with our municipal advisor who looks at this on an annual basis to see what kind of savings we might potentially have out there. So in the end, when we look at refundings for bonds, we're just trying to lower the debt service payment of those bonds so that we can save money. Generally, when we're talking about them, the savings, it might be a couple $1 million or something like that. This is fairly high compared to any type of refinancing bonds that the city would generally look at, just because of the amount of the bonds that are still outstanding and the interest rates that were financed at the time. So when all of this was originally crafted, the original interest rate projections were about 5%. You can see on the chart up here that 3.8 is what they actually came in at. The 2010 and the A, B, and C series would be fairly difficult to refund because of some of the provisions that were put within the bond. And if you're interested in that, we can talk more about that. We have bond counsel and also our municipal advisor here. So really, we're looking at the 2011, the 2013 series that are primed for opportunity for refinancing right now. You can see those are at 4.25 and 4%. When we look at the current market rates, we're looking at 2.7 and 2.73. So pretty substantial decrease in the interest rate. That would bring that overall weighted average to 3.2. So some of the things about the structure, because have been things that have changed since these bonds were originally put in place. So in 2017, with the new tax law, it disallows advanced refundings for tax-exempt bonds. So that's why we can't do advanced refunds anymore on tax-exempt bonds. But one thing that has been beneficial is because of that tax law change, the spread between what a taxable bond and a tax-exempt bond has shrunk considerably. So it looks there's benefit to looking at taxable bonds and issuing those instead of issuing tax-exempt. Because the only way that we can advance refund this, because the call date is in 2021 for the 2011 bonds, and the call date for the 2013 is in 2023. So an advance refund is basically you're refunding the bonds before you're hitting that actual call date. So the only way we can advance refund is by looking at taxable bonds. In addition to the savings that we'll get, there's also benefits because of limitations on private activity. So when you issue tax-exempt debt, the IRS basically says you can only have a minimal amount of private activity that they would consider. So in this case, when we enter into a suite agreement, that's considered bad debt or private activity, and you're limited to about 10% of the bonds that can be within that private activity. That includes also any parking lease arrangements that we might have is also considered private activity. So by issuing taxable debt, this allows us more flexibility within the arrangements basically that we're making for parking type lease agreements, that we'll be able to promise more of the JPA garage spaces out to private entities for parking. So there's additional benefits besides what the interest savings are. So 2011 series refunding, anytime we do advanced refundings, GFOA, which is Government Finance Officers Association, recommends a 5% threshold. So you can see right now for the 11 bonds, based on today's market, is about 15.4%. So we're well above that 5% threshold. About 15.4 million in net present value savings. And in today's dollars, that's 21.7 million that's going to be spread over the life of the bonds. So that net present value is just the discounted value of that 21.7 million. That's just recognizing that today's dollar is not going to be a dollar in the future, so we discount those savings back. The 2013, same thing, 5% for advanced refunding. We're currently looking at 7.31%, which is about 1.9 million net present value savings, or 2.71 million over the life of the bonds. So still a significant amount. The one thing we're continuing to watch on this one is where the market goes. So if we get closer to that savings threshold of 5%, this is one that we might want to look at holding. So I'll probably be working with the administration to keep a close eye on that, as this resolution would basically give me the latitude and flexibility to say, if the savings is there, go ahead and do it. So that's one that I would say we're going to continue to watch moving forward. In addition to the change in the tax law, there has also been changes in state law. LB 132 that was signed in May of 2015, that does not allow for additional principal, so adding money to the bonds or extending the final maturity of the bonds. To do that, a public vote is required. However, we do have cost whenever we issue bonds, and those come in the cost of issuance, and I'm including in there things like the underwriter's discount, bond counsel fees, municipal advisor fee, rating agency fees. So these are all costs that you have to pay out to issue a bond. But in addition, since we're doing advance refunding, there's also some negative carrying costs. And that's just the fact that we have bonds outstanding that we have to pay until that call date. And those are paying at 4%. They're 4% outstanding. Versus we would issue this money and put it in escrow, and then we would earn maybe like 1.5%. So the negative carrying cost is the difference between what we're earning in escrow and then the 4% that we have to pay until the call date. So that's about $7.2 million in total, which would require the JPA to put in a cash contribution of about $8.4 million. So the board's considered that, and they've approved this action. We're fortunate that we have built up a fairly large surplus, which was what was originally planned. So we'll be able to take those funds out of the surplus amounts that the JPA has. So basically, this is what we had at the adopted budget. So this is a chart that shows end of year cash, which is the blue line. And then we have reserve cash requirements that we have to keep in place. And you can see, we're estimating that long term, there's going to be a fairly substantial buildup in cash over the long term. You can see there's dips in that, and that's primarily due to large capital investments. So we have a capital improvement plan in addition to the adopted budget that's forecasted over the life of the JPA, basically until 2046. So that includes, substantial updates at the arena, whether it's replacing scoreboards, which is a major expense, or retractable seating or seating. So there's a lot of things that go into the planning of the footprint of that area. You can see, so based on that, you get out to the kind of end life of the JPA, and you can see cash balances, nearing $100 and some million. So this is the updated chart based on the refundings. So you can see there's pretty substantial increase basically in what the cash does over the life of the bonds because of the savings that were generated by the refunding of the 11 and the 13 series. So in the end, this refunding structure, we're looking at lowering the interest rates from 3.8 to 3.2, lowering the bond payments overall for the JPA to generate more savings. Total net present value savings of about $17.3 million for the JPA. So, like I said, this is probably the largest refunding I've ever been a part of. Which is, it's pretty exciting when you're out saving taxpayer money. And so you're probably asking, well, what's the council's role in that? So as part of
What's the council's role in that?
there you go. So as part of the original joint public agency agreement, one of the terms in that was any bonds that are issued have to be not only approved by the joint public agency board, but they also have to be approved by the city council and the mayor. So that's why this item's coming before you as an action item on the upcoming agenda.
Go with him first. Go with
Questions?
Yeah.
Richard?
Length of these bonds, 30 years originally? Or because now you're saying 2042 or 45
So
or 45?
the
Yeah.
term of the bonds doesn't change. Scott,
So it's 30 years.
the term of the bonds doesn't change over the life. But this chart here shows the principal and interest payments over the total life of all the bonds outstanding. So the terms, I think, for the 11 were
20, the final maturities have not changed. Scott Keene, Piper Jaffray, good afternoon. As Brandon said, the final terms of the bond issues have not changed. The original 2011 bonds had a final maturity of December of 2042. The 2013 bonds had a final maturity of December of 2043. So we'll be amortizing over exactly those same terms, not extending the amortization at all.
And they will be not, these are be taxable bonds.
They will be taxable bonds, that's correct.
Okay, and the early refunding or advance any, what will be the call dates on the new ones? Do they change?
The vast majority of issues of taxable issues that are coming to market right now have 10-year calls. So to try to make our issue look as much like the other issues in the marketplace and make it as appealing to bidders as we can.
Okay.
We haven't made a final determination, Mr. McGinnis, but we're looking at 10 years, 10-year par call.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to add to Brandon's description was that the net present value savings, that dollar amounts he was showing, the $17.3 million on a combined basis, is after paying all of the costs of issuance and that contribution of cash from the surplus fund, which we are going to, through the structuring of the debt, going to get back into the surplus fund over the next 2.5 years.
So I guess that was my question, because I thought, Brandon, you had said for the 2011 bond, it was 21.7 million over the life of the bond, of the savings, but it was revised to 17 million that is offset by the expenses for, no?
We make it even more complex than that.
Yeah.
It is over the life of the issue. The 21.7 is just the 2011 bond standalone.
Right.
So if we look at the savings over the life of the issue, literally the dollar of savings we'll receive every year for the next 23 years, that totals up to $21.7 million. But recognizing that that dollar of savings we'll be getting in 2042 isn't worth nearly as much to the city or to the agency as a dollar of savings today, by convention, we discount all those future savings down into today's dollars so that we have an apples to apples comparison as to what's it really worth to the issuer, what's it really worth to the agency right now. And that's the $15.4 million. That's the net present value savings. Both of those amounts are after paying the costs of issuance.
Discount rate?
It's the discount rate
What
is,
is it?
it is the all-inclusive rate on the new bonds, 2.73%.
Benny?
Yes, if you go forward a couple of slides, there was an average savings. It went from something, no, I should go the other direction. It went from something to 3.2. And I didn't catch the first number. That's the
No,
new number.
3.8.
3.8.
So original projections were 5. What actually came in was 3.8, and then we're looking at being able to lower that to 3.2%. So that's the blended rate on the for the bond, for the JPA bonds. We do have some city bonds and that were also issued, the turnback tax bonds, but those were actually issued by the city and not the JPA. So this one just focuses on the JPA bonds.
Did I hear you also had BABs?
I'm sorry?
You had some BAB funds?
Yes, the 2010 A's, the 2010
Or the
B's
Build
were both
America
Build
ones.
America bonds. The 2010 C's were actually recovery zone bonds, which were just like the Build America bonds, only they had a more restrictive allowable use, but had a 45% subsidy versus the 35% subsidy for the BABs. So that's what the Series 2010 C's were.
Great. No other questions? Thank you.
No.
Oh, Benny.
No, I
Oh,
just want to
sorry.
thank Brandon and Chris Connolly and Scott. This is the third time I've sat through this briefing. And I finally kind of, and it's a good thing. What'd you say, Richard? Or Council? Yeah. But no, I was around for the original BAB funding when I was wearing my Senate hat. So it's fun to see the ERA bonds that work and save the city money. And so anytime we can do that. So thank you for and Dan and Jennifer as well for all the history. I think it's amazing what we've done prior to my serving. So thank you both very much. It's exciting times when we can save.
Yes. So what, would you like to see this presentation again at council?
I never get tired of bond issues. I know that when we talked to Girls State about all the stormwater bonds, and I was all jazzed up, and their eyes were glazing over. So they didn't think it was exciting, but saving our taxpayer money is always exciting. Who couldn't get jazzed up about that? So,
Chair, having said that, I'd like to ask one more, I'm sorry to do
sure.
this to you.
Oh, please do.
What are we looking at in the way of timelines?
Good question. We're meeting this afternoon to do a final revision of the draft documents. They'll be shipped off to the rating agencies. We hope to have ratings back before the end of the month, get to market early in November. So we're trying to move forward very quickly, so today's action of the council will allow us to stay on track with that.
Thank you, that was helpful to me. We can see savings before the end of the year.
Okay.
You have the right to timing, and we're giving Brandon the right to.
Yes.
That's
Correct.
right.
How much time do they have? A year?
Not sure we put a final date, did we?
2 years? 3 years?
I think one thing, when I come to
If this drags out, you'll be back to us.
Exactly,
when
exactly.
I come to the board for action generally on bonds, we're generally going to take that action unless there's some trigger that is not met, that, the savings aren't going to be met. I've held off on bonds before because we didn't hit our policy for threshold of savings. So we just didn't approve going to market on those. So, but generally, if the board approves something, we look to move forward on it. So,
Really quickly.
yeah.
Very cool.
Great. Any other questions?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. Was this the fastest presentation?
It's good.